I never imagined that one quiet evening would change the way I saw everything and everyone. That night, my son waited until the last guest had left until the front door clicked shut, and the hum of conversation faded into silence. And then with a look I'll never forget, he spoke words that would stay with me for the rest of my life. I thought I knew how the night would end, but what happened after was nothing like I expected. Before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Which city? Which state? I love knowing how far these stories travel, and maybe tonight you'll see a piece of yourself in mine. It had been a long day, the kind that leaves you feeling both tired and oddly alive. My home still carried the warm traces of the dinner we'd hosted, laughter lingering in the corners, the faint scent of roasted chicken and herbs in the air. The table was scattered with the remnants of dessert plates and half-filled coffee cups, the kind of mess you only get when the evening has been good. Family and a few close friends had been over, the living room buzzing with conversation. My son Ethan had been his usual quiet self at first, moving through the crowd with a polite smile, but I'd noticed his eyes finding mine every now and then. It wasn't unusual. Ethan had always been thoughtful, but there was something different in those glances tonight. As the night dawned, people began to drift away. Coats were pulled from the hooks by the door. The last rounds of goodbyes were exchanged. I stood by the entrance, smiling and thanking everyone for coming, feeling the winter air slip in each time the door opened. And then finally the door closed behind the last guest. It was just the two of us now. The quiet was almost startling after the noise of the evening. The soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound. Ethan was leaning against the archway between the living room and the hall, his hands in his pockets, eyes steady on me. "You look tired, Mom," he said, his voice low but warm. I gave a small laugh, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "You try cooking for 10 people and see how you feel." But he didn't smile back the way I expected. Instead, he took a slow step forward. His gaze fixed on me like he was choosing his words carefully. The kitchen light cast a golden glow, softening the sharp edges of the room. I could feel the heat of the oven still lingering, the faint tick of cooling metal. My hands itched to start cleaning, to busy myself, but something in his expression rooted me to the spot. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said, "but I didn't want to do it with everyone around." His voice carried a weight that made my heart skip a beat. 1,000 possibilities rushed into my head. Was he in trouble? Was he moving away? My stomach tightened as I waited. He moved closer slowly, as though giving me a chance to stop him if I wanted to. His footsteps were soft against the wooden floor, but each one felt deliberate. When he was close enough that I could see the faint crease at the corner of his eyes, he stopped. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, "about us, about how much you've done for me over the years, things I never thanked you for." I blinked a little, caught off guard. "Ethan, you've always been grateful." "No," he interrupted gently. "I mean, really thanked you. Not just with words you say because you're supposed to, but the way I feel now, it's different." His tone was deeper, softer, almost reverent. The air between us seemed to grow warmer. I tried to focus on my breathing, on the way the faint light from the dining room danced on the edges of his hair. I wasn't sure where he was going with this, but something in me knew it was important. "Tonight," he said, "watching you with everyone, I realized how strong you are. You've carried so much, and you still find a way to smile. I don't think I've ever told you how much that's meant to me." I felt my throat tighten. He wasn't just talking about the dinner. He was talking about years, decades of shared history. The late nights when he was sick as a child, the quiet encouragement during his toughest moments, the sacrifices I'd made without ever asking for anything back. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled. Then not the polite one from earlier, but the real one, the kind that reached his eyes. And for a moment the years between us seemed to shrink, as if we were simply two people, standing in the middle of a warm kitchen, sharing something unspoken yet deeply felt. He reached out, not hurriedly, but with a quiet certainty, and took my hand in his. His palm was warm, grounding. My breath caught, not because it was sudden but because it was intentional. His eyes searched mine, not for permission exactly, but for understanding. We stood like that for what felt like a long time. The room holding us in its soft glow. The dishes could wait. The mess could wait. In that moment, there was only the sound of our breathing and the quiet promise of something changing, something neither of us had quite expected. and deep down I knew we had just stepped into a new chapter of our lives. The silence after his words felt like the pause before a summer storm. Thick, expectant, charged with something I couldn't name. Ethan still held my hand, but it wasn't the grip of a man crossing a line. It was my son anchoring himself to the person he trusted most. I felt that truth settle in my chest like a steadying weight. "Come sit," I said, not into the kitchen table. The candles had burned down to soft stubs, little islands of light in cooled pools of wax. I pulled out 2 chairs, set the kettle to low for a second wind of tea, and we sat across from each other. His hands were folded, thumbs pressed together, the way he used to when he was trying to be brave in the doctor's office. He looked older and younger at the same time. "I didn't know how to start this," he said at last, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath all evening. "I'd rehearsed it so many times on the drive over while I was helping you carry dishes while Aunt May was telling her story about the train ride. But every version felt too small." "Start anywhere," I said. "I'm listening." He nodded. The refrigerator hummed. The house settled and somewhere outside a car passed by, tires whispering across damp pavement. He cleared his throat. "I've been in therapy for a while," he said. 6 months, actually. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to worry you before I knew how to say things right. Something inside me loosened. Not because I was glad he'd been struggling, but because the word therapy meant there was a path beneath his feet. A map, a hand-drawn route through the forest. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. He swallowed, and for a moment I saw the boy who once hid behind my legs on the first day of kindergarten. I was angry for a long time, and I didn't know where to put it. At myself, at Dad after he left, at the years that didn't turn out how I thought they would. I told myself I was fine, but I kept finding these pockets in my chest where everything ached. I felt the old pains rise like ghosts at the end of the table. The slammed doors, the tight schedules, meals eaten in silence, nights I waited for him to call. The way love can become a hall of mirrors when life throws curveballs and no one is equipped to catch them. "What changed?" I asked. He reached into his jacket and set a folded piece of paper on the table. The paper had softened at the edges from being handled too much. I recognized the handwriting even before I opened it. My mother's looping careful letters. For a second the room shifted, the years between us collapsing like the bridge of a song you can hum but never quite sing through without breaking. "You kept this." My voice was barely audible. "I found it in a box when I helped you move the year I graduated." He said. "I read it every time I felt like I was slipping. I didn't understand most of it then, but I kept it anyway. Last month I finally got it." I opened the letter. My mother's words rose up in that familiar way, plain, steady, tender. She had written it to me when I was 32 and new to being a mother. "You will think love is a feeling, but it's more of a practice, like keeping a garden. Sometimes flowers, sometimes pruning." The line that always caught me was near the bottom. "When it's quiet and everyone has gone home, the truth you're carrying will ask to be seen. Don't be afraid to look." I pressed my fingers to the paper, and the memory of my mother's voice in our old kitchen swept over me like warm air after rain. I looked up. Ethan was watching me with eyes that were both his and somehow mine. "I'm not here to make you fix anything," he said. "I'm here to tell you what I should have said years ago. I didn't understand how much you helped together. I thought strength meant never needing help. But that's not it, is it?" I shook my head, smiling through the sting in my eyes. "Help is not a weakness. It's the bridge." He drew a breath. Then the words came out clean and simple and brave. "I want to come home for a while. Not because I'm failing, because I want to make something with you. A different kind of life than the one I've been pretending I wanted." The kettle clicked off softly, and the sound felt like a period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing my whole life. "What do you mean come home?" I asked, wary of assuming too much. "For a week, a month? You know, I'd always make space for you." He smiled and the years carved into his face rearranged into something younger, longer. "I talked to my landlord. My lease is up in 2 months. I've been saving. I'm not running away from anything. I just realized I've been running past the things that matter. I miss the way we used to talk. I miss Sunday nights that actually feel like a beginning, not a countdown to Monday." We let the idea sit between us. It was big and bright and a little startling, like opening the blinds and finding the view has changed while you weren't paying attention. I poured us tea. Steam rose in soft ropes. He cradled his cup with both hands and leaned forward. There's more, he said, lifting his eyes. I want us to start something together. Nothing huge. Just do you remember the way people reacted when you brought that lemon cake to the community fundraiser? The stories they told. The way half the neighborhood stayed an extra hour because they felt welcome. I laughed. That was because you played DJ and snuck in all the old songs. That helped, he said, grinning. But it was more than the music or the cake. It was you. The way you make a room feel like a porch light. I want us to build that feeling into something real. A simple supper club, small at first. Wednesday nights, long tables, neighbors who don't know each other yet. A space where people feel seen. We can set up a little story corner where folks share something about their week. I can handle logistics, scheduling the site. You do the menu and the whatever you call that thing you do where everyone relaxes without noticing. My heart beat a little faster. I held his gaze and felt my face break into a smile that surprised me with its own brightness. There are words you don't know you're starving for until someone speaks them out loud. Porch light. A place to gather. Scene. The kind of words that make a life expand at the seams without splitting. You thought this through, I said. I have, he replied. I want a life where we build something good and steady and open. I want to be close enough to show up, not just drop in on holidays. And I don't want to wait until something awful forces us to finally say the things we mean. I want to start now. We sat with the plan like two carpenters turning a piece of wood in our hands to find the grain. My mind sketched it naturally. The long table down the middle of the rec center room we could rent cheaply. The white tablecloths ironed on Sunday afternoons. The big pot of the kind of soup that tastes like a memory. The index cards and pins in a small tin for notes of gratitude or stories worth sharing. A little sign near the door where people could write their names and favorite songs for the playlist. You know, I said. This sounds like something your grandmother would have loved. He smiled softly. I thought so too. That's the other reason for the letter. I wanted to ask if we could name it after her porch, the willow step or something. That little concrete step where she used to sit with you while the light faded. The willow step, I said, and the name settled into the room like it had been looking for a home. He leaned back, relief washing over his face, in a way that made him look like the boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after the late movie. But this wasn't regression. It was clarity. I could see the man he had become, a man choosing presence over performance, meaning over motion. You changed my life already, I said, surprised by my own voice, steady and calm, by telling me the truth, by letting me see you clearly, and by asking me to dream out loud with you. He laughed softly, and I realized how rare that sound had become. We had filled our lives with essential noises, alarms, texts, the clatter of dishes, the thud of mail, but not enough laughter that came from relief. Can I ask something else? He said, folding and unfolding the edge of a napkin. It might sound small. Ask. Can we set a rule that we don't wait for big occasions to talk about real things? That we don't let little hurts stack into big silences? I don't want us to go back to fine. I want honest and kind even when it's messy. Yes, I said, feeling the word as a promise, not a reflex. Honest and kind. We can write it down if you want. He nodded. And for a while we did something we hadn't done in years. We planned without rushing. We wrote lists. Not the frantic kind with 100 items and no air between them, but the kind that was really a prayer in bullet points. Call the rec center. Ask the church about spare folding chairs. Find someone with a good bread recipe who's willing to teach. Create a simple web page with a sign up. No ads, no pressure, just show up if you can. Maybe add a note explaining that everyone's story matters and no one has to talk. We talked about keeping the price low and the door open, about making a pot of something hearty for anyone who couldn't pay. We agreed we'd measure success by the noise after dessert, the slow kind, the contented clink that means people don't want to leave yet. At some point I stood and stretched, noticing the time. The house looked softer than it had in months. It's a strange thing how a room will change when two people decide to be fully themselves inside it. The walls don't move, but the space grows anyway. Ethan stood too, and the chair of eggs made a gentle shuff against the tile. He cleared our cups and rinsed them without me asking. When he turned back, his face was open and bright. Thank you, he said, for everything, for listening without trying to fix, for saying yes. I stepped closer and wrapped him in a hug that felt like a door swinging open on oiled hinges. Quiet, easy, certain. He rested his chin lightly on my hair, the way he had when he was taller than me for the first time. We stay like that until the details of the night, coats to hang, lights to turn off, returned like friendly reminders rather than demands. When we finally broke apart, the world hadn't changed. The street outside still held its ordinary dark. The clock still told the same time. The dishes still needed washing. But inside the map of our lives had redrawn itself with a clean line connecting 2 points that had once been fog. He picked up his jacket and paused at the door. Wednesday, he said, half question, half smile. Wednesday, I answered. And every week after, if we can help it. He nodded, then glanced back at the table with the letter still open upon it. He touched the paper gently, then slid it toward me. Keep it, he said. I think she meant it for both of us. After he left, the house felt different. Not empty but expectant, the way a stage feels the moment after the lights come up, and the first note hangs in the air. I stacked the plates, blew out the last candle, and stood at the window while the night settled around the old maple out front. In the glass I caught my reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back, softer at the mouth, clearer at the eyes, a little more alive. I pressed the letter to my heart, and whispered a thank you that was too many names long to say out loud. I rinsed the cups, set the kettle back on the stove for tomorrow morning, and pinned a clean sheet of paper to the corkboard near the calendar. At the top I wrote in blue ink the willow step. Underneath I wrote our first rule, honest and kind. I stood there for a while breathing, letting the words become walls around us, not to keep anyone out, but to make a home where we could finally rest. When I turned off the kitchen light, the room fell into the soft, familiar dark. The kind of dark that isn't empty, just waiting. I climbed the stairs feeling something in me unclench, something old and tired finally allowed to sleep. And above that good tiredness, there was a thread of excitement, thin but strong, like the line of a kite held steady against the wind. I didn't know how many people would come on that first Wednesday night. I didn't know if the soup would be too salty or the music too loud. I didn't know how to explain to anyone what had shifted inside us at the table. But I knew this much. My son had waited until everyone left to tell me the truth that would change both our lives.